3 days after my grandfather's funeral, I drove up the snowy mountain road to Blackwood Ridge Resort, the only thing he left me. Then I discovered $480,000 in stolen rent. The county had paid the HOA $8,000 a month for 5 straight years, while the entire place sat empty. I'm Jake Morrison, and Pinecone Hills HOA had no clue I was coming. The lobby felt like a tomb, thick dust, snow blowing through broken windows, wind moaning through the pines. In his old office, I found the evidence. County checks all signed by HOA President Brenda Worthington. Right then, tires crunched on gravel outside. Brenda walked in, clipboard ready.
Mr. Morrison, you owe $23,000 in violations immediately.
I slid the stack of receipts across the counter, her face drained of color.
Brenda, you've been stealing from my family for 5 years. This isn't over.
What would you do? Drop A if you've ever had an HOA nightmare, and comment your state below. Let me back up. My grandfather Pop built Blackwood Ridge Resort in 1968, 47 cabins around a pristine mountain lake, main lodge hosting 200, hiking trails through Colorado wilderness. For decades, family reunions every summer, 3 generations around that stone fireplace, kids catching trout, the smell of barbecue smoke mixing with pine needles. Pop died in 2019, probate hell followed. By the time lawyers finished circling like vultures at a roadkill buffet, nobody wanted an aging resort 2 hours from Denver. Nobody except me, Jake Morrison, 34, Denver construction foreman who figured I could handle whatever repair nightmares Pop left behind. The drive through Pinecone Hills showed me what I was dealing with. 127 homes, mix of retirees and vacation rentals, every mailbox aligned with military precision, every lawn golf course perfect. This was serious HOA territory. Brenda Worthington appeared within 10 minutes. 58, retired bank manager, HOA president, 8 years running. Pristine white Lexus, clipboard clutched like a sacred weapon, pearl necklace catching afternoon sun, pressed khakis, smile that never reached those calculating eyes. Mr. Morrison, I'm Brenda Worthington, HOA president. We need to discuss your outstanding violations. $23,000, unmaintained landscaping, structural eyesores, unauthorized signage. Papers felt too crisp for supposedly old violations. Your grandfather was equally difficult about following community standards. I'd hoped you might be more cooperative. When I asked for documentation, she sniffed, like I'd suggested something unseemly. Everything will be provided through proper channels. Her clipboard trembled slightly as she clutched it tighter. My neighbor, Mrs. Cecilia, appeared after Brenda left, 70-something, tending her garden with nervous glances. She's been telling everyone she manages your property officially, she whispered. The Postal Service forwards all your mail to her address now. She says she has legal authority. Mrs. Cecilia's screen door creaked as she retreated inside, clearly terrified. County offices reeked of stale coffee and copy toner. You know that distinctive government building smell that suggests dreams go to die. Board clerk Dale pulled payment records, $8,000 monthly to Worthington Property Solutions for maintenance and security services, 5 years running. Lady comes in every month, Dale muttered, always has proper paperwork. Except the signatures were forged. I'd seen Pop's handwriting my whole life. These were amateur hour fakes. Back at the resort, musty lodge air felt heavy with deception. Every step on those groaning floorboards seemed to echo Pop's warnings. In his office, buried under dust and mouse droppings, his journals told the real story. Page after page about Brenda's schemes, how she'd established emergency management protocols after Pop's first heart attack, how she'd convinced the county she was protecting property values through professional oversight, how every maintenance receipt came from her nephew's company, Mountain Security LLC, for services that never happened. Mrs. Cecilia had been doing the actual work, pulling weeds, clearing snow, basic upkeep out of respect for Pop, all while Brenda collected $8,000 monthly for phantom services. Pop's final entry, 2 weeks before death. Jake, she's been stealing for years. County contract requires community benefit, not personal profit. Check the original agreements. Here's what really burned. Brenda had been intercepting Pop's mail, filing fake violation notices, building a paper trail to justify theft. When neighbors asked about maintenance, she'd show nephews receipts. When county asked for updates, she'd point to violation notices proving the property was problematic. I discovered something else that made my construction-trained eye twitch. Her company never filed required state paperwork. In Colorado, property management requires written owner consent, state licensing, and regular financial reporting. Always demand to see actual business licenses before paying any management fees. It's the first line of defense against scammers. The beautiful part? She'd been operating an unlicensed business, forging documents, stealing public funds. That's not HOA overreach. That's federal fraud. Pop had started building the case but died before finishing it. The evidence waited in dusty file cabinets like a time bomb with a very long fuse. Time to light it. The next morning, Brenda showed up with reinforcements. A thin, nervous man in an ill-fitting suit clutched a briefcase like it contained live grenades. Fletcher Grimsby, HOA attorney, clearly wished he was anywhere else on Earth. Mr. Morrison, Brenda's voice dripped artificial honey. Mr. Grimsby has prepared documentation for your property's management transition. Management transition? Nobody had asked me about any transition. Fletcher opened his briefcase with all the enthusiasm of someone performing surgery without anesthesia. Mrs. Worthington has been providing essential services under emergency covenant provisions. We're here to formalize arrangements. The paperwork looked official. Multiple pages, fancy letterhead, enough whereas and heretofore language to choke a lawyer. But my construction-trained eye caught inconsistencies. Mismatched fonts, inconsistent formatting, signatures that looked traced by someone wearing boxing gloves. I'll need my own attorney to review these, I said. Brenda's knuckles went white around that clipboard. Time is essential, Mr. Morrison. County regulations require immediate management resolution. Something about her desperation stank worse than a backed-up septic tank. Legitimate business doesn't require pressure tactics. After they left, I drove to Denver to visit cousin Lisa. She specializes in HOA law. Her office smells like leather-bound legal books and expensive coffee, the kind of place where justice costs $300 an hour but actually delivers results. Lisa examined Brenda's documents for exactly 90 seconds before erupting in laughter. Jake, this woman's made every amateur mistake in the fraud handbook. Lisa pulled up state business records. Remember when Pop's journals mentioned that property managers need proper licensing? Well, Brenda's Worthington Property Solutions didn't exist in any official database. No business license, no bonding, no insurance. In construction, we call this catastrophically stupid. But Lisa's investigation uncovered something chilling. While I'd been focused on my property, Brenda had been running identical scams across 6 other locations. Elderly widow 3 miles down, emergency management fees for 3 years, vacation rental owner in California, 2 years of phantom maintenance charges. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was systematic fraud with a business plan. I spent the next week documenting everything, camera clicking through buildings that reeked of neglect. Broken gutters dangled like arthritic fingers, weeds punched through foundation cracks, paint peeled like sunburned skin. Every photograph proved Brenda's maintenance existed only on fraudulent invoices from her nephew's shell company. That's when Bob Hendricks found me. Retired mailman, 30 years delivering to mountain communities, hands gnarled but mind sharp. Over coffee that could strip varnish, he dropped his bombshell. Never seen maintenance crews up your way, Bob said, weathered fingers drumming chipped formica. But Worthington woman's been plenty busy, always carrying boxes, real secretive-like. Brenda had instructed Postal Service to forward all resort mail to her address, claiming emergency management authority. She'd been intercepting everything. County correspondence, rental inquiries, even Pop's personal mail during his final months. 2 weeks after Pop's funeral, before probate even settled. Here's where I decided to fight back smart. That Thursday evening, Brenda called an emergency HOA meeting about security concerns regarding new property ownership. Perfect opportunity. The community center reeked of burnt coffee and old carpet. 40-some residents packed folding chairs, murmuring nervously as Brenda described imaginary threats I supposedly posed to property values and neighborhood safety. I sat quietly in back, letting her dig her own grave with increasingly dramatic claims about my dangerous renovation plans and questionable maintenance standards. Finally, I stood up. Excuse me, Mrs. Worthington, before we discuss my maintenance plans, could you help residents understand what maintenance you've been providing the past 5 years? The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a chainsaw. Residents shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing they'd never actually seen any maintenance crews at the resort. Mrs. Cecilia, bless her heart, finally spoke up from the front row. "I've been the one pulling weeds by the entrance gate all these years. Haven't seen any professional work done." More awkward silence. You could practically hear Brenda's authority evaporating like morning mist. "Well," stammered resident after resident, "now that you mention it, I always wondered. Never did see any trucks." Brenda's face flushed red as mountain sunset. Her clipboard trembled like autumn leaves as the community realized they'd been watching systematic theft for years without questioning it. Walking back to my truck that night, mountain air crisp with possibility, I knew the tide had turned. Brenda's power had always depended on fear and isolation, keeping victims separate, questioning their own perceptions. But communities are stronger than individual tyrants, and this community was finally waking up. Brenda didn't take her public humiliation well. Monday morning brought Fletcher Grimsby back, looking like he'd rather perform root canal surgery on himself. Behind him stood Brenda, clutching a thick manila folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Mr. Morrison," Fletcher's voice cracked like a teenager asking for prom dates, "my client has prepared a formal cease and desist regarding your interference with lawful property management operations." The cease and desist was 5 pages of legal intimidation, threats about breach of community covenants, and potential criminal liability. Classic scare tactics designed to make normal people fold. Too bad I'm not normal people. "I'll need copies of the original HOA agreements these citations reference," I said calmly. Fletcher and Brenda exchanged glances that could have frozen Colorado in July. "Everything will be provided through discovery," Fletcher mumbled, clearly regretting his career choices. County Records Office smells like old paper and broken dreams, but it's where truth lives when lawyers try to bury it. The original 1968 covenant was refreshingly simple. Basic community standards, elected board, architectural guidelines, no management fees, no violation penalties, no authority for collecting phantom service money. Brenda's updated covenants were complete fiction, probably drafted between daytime TV episodes. But here's where Brenda made her biggest mistake yet. While I was diving into legal documents, she decided to escalate her intimidation campaign. That Tuesday, I discovered a new padlock on the old maintenance shed behind the lodge, a shed that supposedly contained all her management equipment. The lock was bright and shiny, completely different from the rusty hardware everywhere else. When I cut it off with bolt cutters, the smell of mildew and dust hit me like a slap. Inside, nothing but cobwebs, mouse droppings, and 5 years of accumulated neglect. No tools, no equipment, no evidence of any maintenance activity whatsoever. That's when I realized Brenda was actively manufacturing evidence, probably planning to stock the shed with fake equipment to support her fraud claims. She was getting desperate, making rookie mistakes that would have gotten any contractor fired from a job site. Time for my counterattack. I called cousin Lisa and asked her to subpoena Brenda's banking records through legal discovery. Lisa had been itching for a good fight, and HOA fraud gets her blood pumping like caffeine gets normal people going. "Jake," Lisa said over the phone, voice practically vibrating with excitement, "I'm filing for full financial discovery. Bank records, business accounts, tax returns, everything." 3 days later, Lisa called back with news that made my construction-hardened heart skip beats. "You're not going to believe what we found." Brenda's banking records revealed systematic deposits matching exactly the county's monthly payments, immediately transferred to her personal accounts. But here's the beautiful part. She'd been running identical operations on 5 other properties across 3 counties. The Patterson cabin down the road, 3 years of emergency management fees from a Texas family who visited twice yearly. The Johnson place near Pine Ridge, 2 years of phantom maintenance charges. An elderly widow in Copper Creek, 4 years of systematic theft while she battled dementia in assisted living. Lisa's investigation showed Brenda had perfected a targeting system. Elderly owners, absent owners, recently deceased owners whose families were overwhelmed with estate issues. She'd study obituaries like other people read sports scores, looking for opportunities. Remember when Pop's journals mentioned that HOA presidents have fiduciary duties? Well, this discovery proved Brenda had been systematically violating those duties across multiple jurisdictions. What I'd thought was simple theft was actually organized fraud with criminal enterprise implications. But Mrs. Cecilia provided the smoking gun. That sweet elderly woman had been conducting surveillance that would have impressed professional investigators. Over coffee that could strip paint, she handed me 5 years of detailed logs. I knew something wasn't right, Mrs. Cecilia said, her weathered hands steady as mountain stone. Bob Hendricks and I started comparing notes about her activities. Their documentation was devastating. Photographs of Brenda entering managed properties alone, never with maintenance crews. Detailed timelines showing her visits to multiple properties on single days, carrying boxes and clipboards but no actual tools. Even utility records showing these managed properties had suspiciously low water and electrical usage despite claims of regular maintenance. The scope was breathtaking. Systematic document forgery, mail interception, trespassing, and theft across multiple counties. Conservative estimate? Over $200,000 stolen from various families over 5 years. That evening, I sat in Pop's old office surrounded by evidence that painted a picture clearer than mountain air after rain. Brenda had been so confident in her authority that she documented her own crimes, photographing properties for management files that were actually evidence of systematic trespassing. Lisa called with the final piece. Jake, this isn't just civil fraud anymore. With the banking evidence and multiple jurisdictions involved, we're looking at federal charges, wire fraud, mail fraud, potentially RICO if we can prove ongoing criminal enterprise. Brenda Worthington had been building a house of cards in hurricane season, and the storm was about to hit. Wednesday morning brought Brenda's nuclear option. I woke to metal rattling and mountain wind, condemned signs posted around every building, big red letters screaming danger, official-looking county stickers dated that morning. My phone rang before I'd finished coffee. Brenda's fake concern made my skin crawl. Mr. Morrison, county inspection revealed serious structural deficiencies. For community safety, we've posted emergency condemnation notices. Structural deficiencies? I'd been crawling through these buildings for weeks. They needed paint, not demolition. Which inspector? I asked. A very thorough structural engineer. His report is quite comprehensive. I called county building immediately, reached Dave Kowalski, the actual chief inspector. No inspections scheduled for your area, Dave said, genuinely confused. Though some HOA lady calls weekly about that resort. Always wants inspections but cancels, says she'll handle it privately through community enforcement. Handle it privately. The inspection stickers were laughably fake. Wrong fonts, incorrect permit numbers, county seal that looked photocopied from someone's filing cabinet. That evening, my security cameras caught pure gold. Brenda sneaking around after dark, removing the condemned signs she'd posted that morning. Beautiful footage of HOA President Brenda Worthington personally vandalizing her own fake safety notices. Even better? She dumped the signs behind the Patterson cabin. Mrs. Cecilia's surveillance network caught that midnight expedition too, photographing Brenda's dumping with National Geographic dedication. But here's where the real breakthrough happened. Thursday afternoon, I organized what I called a community coffee meeting at the lodge. Innocent enough name, but I was actually gathering intelligence from every neighbor who'd been watching Brenda's operation for years. The turnout surprised me. 15 residents showed up, carrying years of suppressed suspicions and documentation. The lodge smelled like fresh coffee and pine needles streaming through open windows, voices echoing off stone walls for the first time since Pop's funeral. Eleanor Patterson drove up from Texas, 78-year-old grandmother with steel eyes and righteous anger. That woman's been stealing from us for 3 years, claiming our cabin needed emergency oversight because we're absent owners. Behind her came the Johnson family, David Cecilia representing his aunt's friend in Copper Creek, and others I hadn't expected. Each brought identical fraud documentation, forged management agreements, fake violations, phantom bills from the nephew's shell company. But Mrs. Cecilia provided the historical bombshell that changed everything. While organizing Pop's papers for the meeting, she'd found his original vision documents from 1968, community planning papers showing the resort was specifically designed to benefit the entire neighborhood. Your grandfather intended this place as an anchor for community gatherings, Mrs. Cecilia explained, spreading yellowed blueprints across the wooden table. Lake access for everyone, summer festivals, youth programs. He believed strong communities support each other. Reading those documents felt like discovering buried treasure. Pop hadn't just built a business. He'd created a community resource that Brenda had been systematically destroying while stealing the money intended to maintain it. The beautiful irony: Brenda had been violating her most fundamental duty as HOA president. In Colorado, HOA board members have fiduciary responsibility to act in community interests, not personal enrichment. Every dollar she'd stolen was a breach of trust that carried both civil and criminal penalties. That's when my mini-twist arrived via Lisa's phone call. While we were sharing stories, she'd been coordinating with federal investigators who'd uncovered something that made everyone in that room sit straighter. "Jake," Lisa's voice crackled through speakerphone, "this isn't just regional fraud. Brenda's operation spans 4 states. We've identified 37 properties, 14 different shell companies, and systematic targeting of elderly and military families." 37 properties. The room went silent except for mountain wind whistling through pine boughs outside. "Conservative estimate," Lisa continued, "we're looking at over $800,000 in direct theft, plus systematic mail fraud, wire fraud, and organized criminal activity that qualifies for RICO prosecution." RICO meant federal charges with 20-year sentences and complete asset forfeiture. What had started as my personal discovery of local theft had become a federal investigation spanning multiple states. Eleanor Patterson spoke for all of us. Individually, we're confused victims. Together, we're a federal case. But Brenda wasn't finished fighting. Friday brought her most desperate move, approaching me privately outside Murphy's Diner, voice dropping to conspiracy whispers. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps we can reach accommodation. I'm prepared to refund half the management fees in exchange for discretion about this misunderstanding." "And half the stolen money for silence about systematic fraud spanning 4 states? "Brenda," I said calmly, "the only accommodation happening is full restitution plus federal charges." Her mask finally slipped. Fake concern disappeared, replaced by cold calculation that had lurked behind those pearls for years. "You have no idea how much power I have in this community. Cross me, and I'll make your life very difficult." Standing in autumn mountain air, watching this woman threaten me for exposing federal crimes, I realized something beautiful. Brenda Worthington had just confessed everything on my digital recorder. The best traps are the ones people walk into themselves. That weekend, while cleaning Pop's office for federal investigators, I found something that changed everything. Behind a loose wallboard panel, the kind of hiding spot a paranoid old construction worker might create, sat a weathered manila envelope sealed with decades of mountain dust. The scent of old paper and cedar wood from that hidden space hit me like a time capsule opening, releasing secrets Pop had kept locked away since before his death. My hands shook as I spread documents across his desk, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline as I realized what he'd discovered. The original 1968 Resort Incorporation papers told a story nobody knew. Blackwood Ridge hadn't been built as private business. It was deeded as a community benefit corporation, with the county as funding partner. State grants, county subsidies, all based on one crucial requirement. The resort must provide perpetual public access and community programming. For 50-plus years, my family had unknowingly operated a public-private partnership funded by taxpayer money specifically designated for community benefit. But here's the bombshell that made my construction-trained brain nearly explode. Those county payments Brenda had been stealing weren't management fees at all. They were community benefit funds, taxpayer money allocated to maintain public lake access, hiking trails, youth camps, senior programs, environmental education. Every month for 5 years, she'd been cashing checks meant to fund community resources while systematically denying those benefits. Instead of building programs that could transform the region, she'd been buying luxury cars with money that legally belonged to everyone. Pop's final letter, paperclipped to incorporation documents, hit like a sledgehammer. "Jake, county contract requires community access and programming. Brenda's been stealing public funds while denying community benefits. This isn't just fraud, it's systematic theft of taxpayer resources. The penalties are enormous, but so is the recovery potential. Fight for the community I always intended." I called Lisa immediately, voice cracking as I read the incorporation language over speakerphone. "Jake?" Her excitement was infectious. "This changes everything. Those aren't private management fees, they're misappropriated public funds. You know what that means?" I didn't, but I was about to learn. Federal penalties for public fund theft include mandatory treble damages. When someone steals taxpayer money, the law allows courts to multiply recovery by 3, plus interest, plus attorney fees, plus punitive damages for willful misconduct. My calculator started smoking as Lisa ran numbers. Conservative estimate, $480,000 in direct theft becomes $1.4 million in basic recovery. Add 8 years of denied community programming, lost tourism revenue, systematic public benefit theft. She paused for effect. Jake, we're looking at an $18.7 million federal lawsuit. $18.7 million. The number echoed through Pop's office like thunder rolling through mountain valleys. This also triggers federal RICO prosecution, Lisa continued. When theft of public resources follows an organized pattern, which Brenda's multi-state operation clearly does, it becomes criminal enterprise prosecution. The FBI has been tracking a statewide HOA fraud ring, and your case just became their centerpiece. The beautiful irony was perfect. Brenda thought she'd been stealing from individual property owners, but she'd actually been robbing entire communities of resources they'd already funded through taxes. But here's what made me smile. Federal prosecutors needed a lead plaintiff willing to coordinate the class action lawsuit representing all victims. Someone with skin in the game, community connections, and enough documentation to anchor the entire case. They wanted me to be the face of an $18 million federal lawsuit that would expose HOA fraud across multiple states. Pop's vision hadn't just been about maintaining a resort. It had been about anchoring thriving mountain communities with programs that would benefit generations. Brenda Worthington hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen futures. But federal law had a beautiful way of evening scales. When you steal from communities, communities get everything back, with interest compounded over every year of systematic theft. $18 million of justice was coming due. Monday morning brought a phone call that would have made Pop proud. Special Agent Maria Santos from the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, voice carrying authority of someone who'd built careers dismantling white-collar criminals. Mr. Morrison, your documentation unlocked the largest HOA fraud investigation in Rocky Mountain history. We need to coordinate federal prosecution. Lisa drove me to Denver's federal building that afternoon, intimidating glass structure where justice lives in climate-controlled comfort. The smell of freshly waxed floors and institutional coffee guided us to a conference room where Agent Santos spread files like a general planning invasion. Your case broke open something we've been tracking for 2 years, she began, sliding photographs across polished mahogany. Brenda's part of a coordinated network spanning 4 states, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico. The photos showed properties I'd never seen, mountain cabins, desert ranches, lake houses scattered across the West. Each targeted using Brenda's identical playbook: elderly owners, absent owners, grieving families drowning in estate complications. 47 properties confirmed, Agent Santos continued, total theft exceeding $4.2 million, but your community benefit angle transformed simple fraud into federal conspiracy to steal public resources. Lisa had been busy. Weekend work produced a federal RICO lawsuit seeking $22.3 million in damages, naming Brenda, her nephew, and 15 shell companies. The paperwork could stop bullets, legal language that translated to, "You're completely screwed." Agent Santos had bigger plans. "We want you as lead plaintiff in multi-state class action. Your documentation is most complete, community connections strongest, and your story anchors the entire prosecution." Lead plaintiff in a $22 million federal lawsuit. 3 months ago, my biggest legal concern was building permit delays. The next weeks became a montage of preparation that would have impressed military planners. I applied construction project management skills to organize victim testimony across 4 states, creating documentation systems that turned chaos into evidence. Here's where my contractor background became crucial. I knew how to create forensic timelines. Using the same methods I'd used to track construction delays, I mapped every fake maintenance claim against actual property conditions, creating visual proof that Brenda's services existed only on paper. The smell of sawdust and spreadsheets filled Pop's office as I built evidence boards like architectural blueprints, photos, timelines, financial records, all cross-referenced to show systematic patterns spanning multiple jurisdictions. Forensic accountant Rebecca Kim traced money through shell companies with bloodhound precision. Her investigation revealed Brenda's beautiful systematic approach: study obituaries and estate filings, identify vulnerable properties, move in with official-looking paperwork, and manufactured urgency. 8 years of perfecting criminal enterprise, Rebecca explained. Screens showing money flowing through Mountain Heritage Management and Alpine Security Solutions. Every stolen dollar, every forged document, every fake violation, coordinated fraud with clear patterns. But I had to rally community support for the class action lawsuit. Federal courts require demonstrated damages exceeding $5 million when multiple states are involved. Legal threshold that forces prosecutors to prove systematic harm across jurisdictions. I organized information meetings in church basements and community centers, venues that smelled like coffee and determination. Victim after victim shared identical stories. Mysterious management fees, intercepted mail, intimidation tactics, systematic theft disguised as community protection. Individually, we're confused victims, Eleanor Patterson summarized perfectly. Together, we're a federal case worth $22 million in recovery. Agent Santos coordinated the beauty of federal investigation. While Brenda focused on local intimidation, FBI agents interviewed victims across 4 states. Financial investigators froze her assets. Computer specialists analyzed digital footprints showing coordination between supposedly independent shell companies. Investigative journalist Sarah Cecilia from Denver Post became our media strategy coordinator. Her preliminary article about regional fraud patterns went viral, triggering calls from additional victims who'd been suffering in isolated silence. Your story gave other victims permission to speak up, Sarah explained over coffee that could power construction equipment. Nobody wants to admit they've been scammed, but organized resistance creates courage. The technical preparation was extensive. Rebecca's forensic analysis required construction-grade attention to detail, tracking every fake maintenance claim against actual property conditions, proving systematic deception across multiple properties and jurisdictions. By October, we'd identified 53 total victims documenting theft exceeding $4.8 million. Community benefit violations meant potential recovery climbed to $24 million when factoring treble damages, lost public programming, and punitive awards. Agent Santos coordinated the final trap. Community Day at Blackwood Ridge Resort, ostensibly celebrating restoration but actually serving as venue for very public arrests. Media coverage, multiple law enforcement agencies, hundreds of witnesses, everything needed to demonstrate that communities fight back against systematic fraud. Criminals like Brenda count on victims staying isolated, Agent Santos said during final planning. Public justice sends clear messages. Fraud has consequences, communities have power, federal law protects organized resistance. Autumn pine needles carried promises through Pop's Lodge as we finalized preparations. Tomorrow would restore his vision of community strength while delivering justice building for years. Brenda Worthington had assumed nobody would connect dots, organize resistance, or fight back with coordinated legal action. Some assumptions carry very expensive consequences. Brenda's desperation reached new heights when she realized federal investigators were circling like vultures over roadkill. Tuesday morning brought her most brazen attempt yet, a direct bribery offer delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. She appeared at my doorstep carrying a briefcase and wearing her most expensive pearl necklace, like accessories could somehow legitimize what she was about to propose. "Mr. Morrison," she began, voice dripping with fake sincerity, "I've been reconsidering our misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss a mutually beneficial business arrangement. Business arrangement. That's what she called systematic fraud spanning 4 states. I'm prepared to offer you a partnership in future property management operations," she continued, opening the briefcase to reveal neat stacks of cash. 50-50 split of all management fees going forward, plus a substantial signing bonus to resolve any past disagreements. The smell of money mixed with desperation was almost overwhelming. This woman was offering to cut me into her criminal operation rather than face federal prosecution. "Brenda," I said calmly, "the only arrangement I'm interested in is full restitution and your surrender to federal authorities." Her mask slipped for a moment, revealing the calculating predator beneath those pressed khakis. "You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Morrison. I have connections you can't imagine." That night brought escalation I hadn't expected. The acrid smell of spray paint hit me as I discovered fresh graffiti covering the resort's entrance sign. Ugly red letters claiming the property was unsafe and unwanted by community. Security cameras caught Brenda's nephew Marcus working by flashlight, vandalizing property like a teenager tagging buildings. But Marcus wasn't finished. Wednesday brought systematic sabotage designed to make the resort look dangerous before Community Day. Power lines to the main lodge were cut, leaving us without electricity 3 days before the event. My truck's tires were slashed while parked at the hardware store, metal valve stems gleaming in afternoon sun like evidence of pure malice. The beautiful part? Every act of sabotage was captured on the security system I'd installed throughout the property. High-definition footage of Marcus cutting power lines, slashing tires, spray-painting buildings, a complete video record of criminal conspiracy in action. Brenda's smear campaign intensified as Community Day approached. She contacted my Denver employer claiming I was mentally unstable contractor creating safety hazards and demanded my termination. She called county health department with fake reports about environmental contamination at the resort. She even tried reaching my ex-girlfriend Jennifer, spreading lies about financial irresponsibility and inherited mental illness. The audacity was breathtaking, but her desperation was showing cracks. Each attempt at intimidation felt more frantic, less coordinated, like someone realizing the walls were closing in faster than expected. Thursday brought unexpected backup. Fletcher Grimsby, Brenda's attorney, called Lisa privately with information that made our case airtight. "I can't continue representing Mrs. Worthington," Fletcher admitted during a conference call that sounded like confession. "She's been asking me to prepare documents I know are fraudulent, threatening to sue me if I don't cooperate with activities I believe are criminal." Fletcher provided documentation showing Brenda had been pressuring him to create fake legal opinions supporting her management authority, forge backdated contracts, and prepare fraudulent financial reports for county auditors. When he refused, she threatened to destroy his practice with false complaints to the state bar. "I've been documenting everything," Fletcher said, voice carrying relief of someone finally telling truth. "She's been running a systematic intimidation operation against anyone who questions her authority." But Brenda saved her most desperate move for Friday. She filed a false police report claiming I'd threatened violence during our bribery conversation, describing imaginary weapons and fabricated threats that existed only in her increasingly panicked imagination. Sheriff's Deputy Mike Rodriguez arrived at the resort that afternoon, looking embarrassed about investigating obviously bogus complaints. The smell of pine needles and autumn air seemed to calm him as I provided security footage disproving every claim in Brenda's report. "Mr. Morrison," Deputy Rodriguez said, watching video of our actual conversation, "this woman's been wasting police resources with false reports for months. We've had 6 different complaints about various residents, all following the same pattern, dramatic stories that don't match any evidence." That's when he shared something that made my day. State Patrol's been tracking her movements because of the federal investigation. They know she's been traveling to other counties, probably running similar scams. Your case just gave them the evidence they needed to connect everything. Standing in Pop's office that evening, surrounded by evidence of Brenda's increasingly frantic attempts to escape justice, I felt something that reminded me of completing a difficult construction project. All the pieces were finally coming together, foundation solid, structure sound, ready for the final phase. Brenda Worthington had spent years building her criminal empire on the assumption that isolated victims wouldn't organize resistance. Tomorrow, she was about to learn that some foundations, once cracked, collapse completely. Saturday morning, Community Day minus 24 hours, brought Brenda's final, most desperate gambit. She attempted to have the entire resort condemned through bribery that would have made a mafia don proud. I was installing final sound equipment when my phone rang. Dave Kowalski, the county building inspector, voice tight with anger that could have stripped paint. "Jake, you need to know what just happened. Brenda Worthington just offered me $5,000 cash to file a false structural report condemning your property before tomorrow's event. $5,000 to destroy my family's legacy and sabotage federal justice." The audacity was breathtaking. "Here's the beautiful part," Dave continued. "I recorded the whole conversation. She's sitting in county parking lot right now, probably wondering why I haven't called back with good news." While Dave was building evidence of bribery charges, Brenda launched her media manipulation campaign. She contacted Channel 7 News claiming environmental hazards threaten community safety at tomorrow's event, providing fabricated photographs showing structural damage that existed only in her desperate imagination. The photos were laughably fake, obviously altered images showing foundation cracks and roof damage that any construction worker could spot as digital manipulation. But she was counting on reporters not having technical expertise to identify fraud. Too bad for her. Investigative journalist Sarah Cecilia had been tracking Brenda's operation for months. When Channel 7 called for comment, Sarah provided them with real documentation showing systematic fraud, federal investigation, and Brenda's pattern of false claims. Mrs. Worthington has been fabricating safety concerns to cover systematic theft, Sarah told the confused reporter. Your station might want to investigate who's really threatening community safety. But Brenda wasn't finished. That afternoon brought escalated sabotage that crossed from desperation into genuine criminal territory. The smell of gasoline hit me as I discovered someone had attempted to damage the lodge's electrical system, leaving accelerant residue around the main breaker panel. Security cameras captured Marcus Worthington creeping around the building after midnight, carrying what looked suspiciously like arson supplies. The footage was crystal clear, Brenda's nephew attempting to burn down a building where 300 people would gather tomorrow. I called Agent Santos immediately. We need to accelerate the arrest timeline, she said grimly. Attempted arson during federal investigation adds serious charges to an already overwhelming case. Federal investigators moved fast. By Saturday evening, they'd obtained emergency warrants for Brenda and Marcus, positioned surveillance teams around their properties, and coordinated with local law enforcement for tomorrow's very public takedown. But Brenda had one final manipulation up her designer sleeve. Saturday night brought a performance worthy of Academy Award consideration. She appeared at my door with crocodile tears flowing like mountain streams after spring snowmelt. "Mr. Morrison," she sobbed, mascara running in carefully calculated streaks. "I'm just an overwhelmed widow trying to help my community. I never meant for things to get so complicated." The transformation was remarkable. Pearl necklace replaced with simple jewelry, pressed khakis swapped for modest dress, clipboard nowhere in sight. She'd reinvented herself as a confused victim rather than criminal mastermind. "Perhaps," she continued through manufactured sobs, "I could provide full confession in exchange for reduced charges. I have information about other people who forced me into these activities." Other people. Right. Brenda was attempting to blame unnamed conspirators for her 8-year criminal enterprise. "I was pressured by county officials," she claimed, voice breaking with practiced emotion. "They threatened my late husband's pension if I didn't cooperate with their management schemes." The performance was almost convincing. Almost. Except I'd spent weeks studying her patterns, watching security footage of her coordinating with Marcus, reviewing bank records showing systematic personal enrichment spanning multiple states. "Brenda," I said calmly, "the only confession I'm interested in hearing is in federal court, under oath, with full restitution." Her crocodile tears dried faster than spilled water on hot pavement. The mask slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation that had driven years of systematic theft. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," she hissed, voice carrying venom that would have impressed rattlesnakes. "This community will never accept you. I'll make sure of that." Standing there in mountain darkness, watching this woman threaten me for exposing federal crimes, I realized something that filled me with profound satisfaction. Brenda Worthington was completely finished. Tomorrow would bring federal arrests, media coverage, and public vindication for every victim she'd terrorized over years of systematic fraud. The beautiful irony was perfect. She'd spent years building authority through fear and intimidation, but tomorrow would demonstrate that communities united around truth are stronger than individual tyrants armed with clipboards and fake authority. Pop's vision of community strength was about to triumph over 8 years of systematic corruption, and Brenda Worthington was about to discover that some performances end with standing ovations for justice. Community Day dawned with the kind of crisp Colorado morning that makes you believe in new beginnings. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with pine needles as 300 people gathered at Blackwood Ridge Resort for what they thought was a simple community celebration. They had no idea they were about to witness the largest HOA fraud arrest in regional history. The setup was perfect. Families spread blankets around the lake. Kids ran through hiking trails Pop had built decades ago. Volunteers served food from tables positioned strategically to provide clear sightlines for FBI surveillance teams positioned throughout the crowd. Agent Santos had coordinated everything with military precision. Undercover federal agents mingled with residents, carrying cameras that looked recreational but were actually documenting evidence. Local media had been tipped about significant community announcement without revealing the federal investigation details. Brenda arrived at exactly 11 a.m., driving her white Lexus with the confidence of someone who still believed she controlled the narrative. She stepped out wearing her finest pearl necklace and pressed khakis, clipboard in hand, ready to give what she probably thought would be her triumphant speech about community leadership. The acoustic guitar music stopped as she approached the makeshift stage near the lodge entrance. 300 faces turned toward her, including federal agents, investigative journalists, and victims who traveled from multiple states to witness justice. "Friends and neighbors," Brenda began, voice carrying across the lake with artificial warmth. "Today marks a new chapter in Pinecone Hills community excellence. Through dedicated leadership and careful property management, we've maintained standards that protect all our investments." She continued for 5 minutes, praising her own years of dedicated service and difficult decisions required to protect community integrity. The crowd grew restless as she described unpopular enforcement actions and resistance from irresponsible property owners. That's when I stepped forward. "Thank you, Brenda, for that interesting perspective," I said, approaching the microphone as volunteers unveiled large display boards positioned around the gathering area. The first board showed blown-up bank records, $8,000 monthly payments from county funds to Worthington Property Solutions. The crowd's murmur was audible as numbers became clear, gasps echoing across mountain air. "For 5 years," I announced, "Mrs. Worthington has been collecting these payments from taxpayer funds while providing zero actual services to our community." The second board displayed security footage stills. Brenda and Marcus vandalizing property, removing fake condemnation signs, dumping evidence behind neighboring cabins. The visual impact was devastating. These images show systematic fraud, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy spanning multiple states, I continued, watching Brenda's face drain of color faster than mountain snow melting in spring sun. The third board revealed the scope that made everyone sit up straighter. A map showing 53 properties across 4 states, connecting lines illustrating the systematic nature of Brenda's operation, victim photographs alongside theft amounts totaling $4.8 million. "This isn't isolated misconduct," I declared, voice carrying across water that reflected morning sun like liquid justice. "This is organized crime with Brenda Worthington as the mastermind of the largest HOA fraud ring in Rocky Mountain history." That's when Agent Santos stepped forward, federal badge gleaming in autumn sunlight. "Mrs. Brenda Worthington," she announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "you're under arrest for federal conspiracy, wire fraud, mail fraud, theft of public resources, and racketeering under RICO statutes." The sound of handcuffs clicking mixed with crowd murmurs as Brenda's clipboard crashed to the ground, papers scattering like leaves in mountain wind. Her pearl necklace caught sunlight one final time before federal agents led her toward waiting vehicles. "This investigation has identified systematic theft totaling $4.8 million, Agent Santos continued, with civil recovery proceedings seeking $24 million in damages for affected communities. $24 million. The number echoed across the lake like thunder, finally quantifying the scope of damage Brenda had inflicted on families and communities across multiple states. Mrs. Cecilia stood up from her lawn chair, voice carrying decades of suppressed anger. "We've been afraid of this woman for years. Thank God someone finally stood up to her." One by one, community members shared stories of Brenda's intimidation tactics, fake violations, mysterious fees, and systematic abuse of authority. The catharsis was palpable as years of fear and confusion finally found voice in collective truth-telling. Channel 7 News went live as Marcus Worthington was arrested attempting to flee in a pickup truck loaded with boxes of documents. The visual of nephew and aunt led away in handcuffs while community celebrated behind them created perfect symbolism. This case demonstrates that organized community resistance can defeat even sophisticated criminal enterprises, I told the reporter, mountain breeze carrying my words across water where families were finally able to enjoy the community resource Pop had always intended. Standing at the microphone, looking out over faces filled with relief and vindication, I realized something profound. Justice isn't just about punishing criminals, it's about communities reclaiming power from those who abuse authority. And today, we'd reclaimed everything. 6 months later, I stood in federal court watching Judge Patricia Williams deliver the sentence that would echo through HOA communities across the country. Brenda Worthington, dressed in orange jumpsuit rather than pearl necklaces, listened stone-faced as justice finally caught up with 8 years of systematic fraud. 8 years federal prison, Judge Williams announced, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen enough white-collar crime to recognize true predators. Full restitution of $4.8 million stolen from victims, plus forfeiture of all assets acquired through criminal enterprise. Marcus received 3 years for conspiracy and vandalism. Fletcher Grimsby avoided prison but lost his law license permanently. The entire criminal network that had terrorized mountain communities was finally dismantled, but the real victory was financial. The federal civil lawsuit yielded exactly what Lisa had predicted: $24.2 million in total recovery. RICO treble damages, punitive awards for systematic abuse, attorney fees, and interest compounded over years of theft created the largest HOA fraud settlement in Western regional history. My share as lead plaintiff and primary victim came to $3.7 million, money that felt less like personal windfall than community trust fund requiring careful stewardship. The resort transformation exceeded even Pop's wildest dreams. Blackwood Ridge Community Center reopened with lake access restored for all Pinecone Hills residents, hiking trails expanded and maintained through federal conservation grants, and programming that brought families together around shared resources rather than manufactured division. The smell of fresh coffee and children's laughter filled the lodge most weekends as community members gathered for events Pop would have loved. Senior exercise classes, youth environmental education, family fishing tournaments that connected generations around simple pleasures. Mrs. Cecilia was elected new HOA president by unanimous vote, promising no more fear tactics, no more manufactured crises, just neighbors helping neighbors. Her first official act was establishing term limits and mandatory financial transparency that would prevent future Brendas from gaining unchecked power. The Pop Morrison Memorial Scholarship funded college education for local students, with priority given to those studying construction trades, environmental science, and community development. Watching the first recipients receive awards in the lodge where Pop had dreamed of community strength felt like completing construction on his most important project. The Conservation Initiative protected watershed resources for future generations while creating jobs for local workers. 25 people employed in trail maintenance, environmental education, and sustainable tourism that brought economic development without destroying the mountain character Pop had loved. But the broader impact reached beyond our community. Colorado legislature passed Brenda's Law, requiring annual financial audits for all HOA management companies, mandatory transparency in fee collection, and criminal penalties for document forgery in property management. What started as personal discovery of local theft became statewide protection for vulnerable homeowners. I testified before Congress about HOA reform, sharing Pop's story and explaining how federal enforcement could protect communities from systematic fraud. The experience taught me something profound. Individual courage can inspire collective action, but collective action creates lasting change. Netflix optioned our story for a documentary about HOA corruption, with proceeds funding legal assistance for other fraud victims. My YouTube channel reached 2.8 million subscribers sharing similar David versus Goliath victories, creating a community of resistance against petty tyrants with official-looking clipboards. The first annual Pop Morrison Community Festival drew 800 visitors, transforming our small mountain community into a destination for families seeking authentic outdoor experiences. Local businesses thrived from increased tourism, creating prosperity that honored both progress and tradition. Standing at Pop's grave 6 months after Community Day, I shared news of victories he'd helped make possible. The mountain air carried scents of wildflowers and possibility as I realized his greatest legacy wasn't property or buildings. It was demonstrating that communities united around truth can overcome any individual corruption. 18 months later, I received a call from Phoenix about another HOA seizing homes for minor violations. Then Portland about systematic intimidation of elderly residents. Then Atlanta about document forgery and fraudulent fines. Turns out Brenda's conviction had inspired victims nationwide to organize resistance against HOA abuse. My phone rang constantly with requests for advice, documentation assistance, and moral support from communities fighting their own clipboard tyrants. Looking out over the lake where children played safely and families gathered freely, I realized something that would have made Pop proud. Justice isn't a destination you reach once and forget. It's a foundation you build strong enough to support whatever comes next.